Welcome to Unlocking Moves, where we're going to cover the key decision points and pivotal moments that really change the trajectory of successful entrepreneurs and leaders. And I want to hear their real life stories, not just the glory stories, but also the gory stories. Because as I like to say, the bigger the shit show, the bigger the lesson. Speaking of stories, we're going to have a blast with my guest today. LaQuita Cleare is a storytelling magician, and she has made a living off of helping others tell their stories. But LaQuita, before we dive into that, I've got an off-the-wall, out-of-left-field question I've got to ask to throw you off balance. Are you ready?
Uh-oh. Ready.
Here we go. So before you became a keynote speaker and a speaking coach, you were an actress. And from what I can tell, a very accomplished actress. But the themes, the plots that you seem to get into are a little bit on the psychological side. Movies like Fraction, Justified, Suicide Dolls. It shows where people were being murdered, there were suicide pacts and other, how shall we say, unstable, unhealthy things. So LaQuita Cleare, what are you hiding? What do we need to know about LaQuita? Or was that all an act?
It was all an act, but I do have to say that somehow as an actor, you are drawn sometimes to dark characters. I feel like I'm drawn to things that are so far away from me or outside of myself. Yes, I do watch crime shows, and my favorite movie is Goodfellas, so that ought to tell you something.
Well, I can tell you this, after spending time with you over the last couple of years with CEO Coaching International, and your personality is not what I would consider a psychological thriller. So it's great to know you are an amazing actress.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that you don't consider me to be like a psychological nut or anything like that.
That's so awesome. Hey, LaQuita, thank you so much. As you can hear, my guest today is my friend LaQuita Cleare. She's a co-founder of Clear Communication Academy. She is a very accomplished actress, as I mentioned before. You've seen her on your TV sets and movie theaters and on commercials across the globe. She's spoken in over 50 countries, and now she makes a living by creating impact through other people's stories, from Hollywood actors to entrepreneurs to Fortune 500 execs. LaQuita Cleare, welcome to Unlocking Moves.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here, especially since you and I have gotten to know each other and talk. So I was here. When I got the invite, I was like, yes.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for joining. And I know you're traveling across the globe. So the one chance you get a chance to be home, you're stuck on a podcast with me. But I love it. Thank you. If you're just joining us on Unlocking Moves, today's episode is brought to you as usual by Hire Better, the strategic talent partner for growth-minded entrepreneurs everywhere. I got to hear more about your story, LaQuita. You're from Chicago. You moved to Hollywood. I'm sure there's a lot of good stories there. What is your favorite story, lessons learned? Tell me a little bit about your story. I got to hear it.
There are so many lessons learned. I was literally this naive, and I think there's even a stronger word than that, person who came to Hollywood thinking I was going to be like Meryl Streep. So I show up in Hollywood, and many times I fell flat on my face. But I remember one really big lesson that I learned. I called up probably one of the biggest agents in town. So imagine I'm brand new. I don't have any acting credits, and I'm calling one of the biggest agents in town, people who would deal with people like Brad Pitt, these type of mega celebrities. So I actually managed to get this person on the phone. How? I have no idea. I just called as if they were expecting my call. I get them on the phone and they're like, how did you get through? That's the first thing that they asked me. How did you get through to me? And I said, I want you to represent me. And this particular person said to me, okay, well, let's do a scenario right now. So how much money have you made from acting over the last year? Dumbfounded, because the answer was a big fat zero. And so I was like, oh, well, I didn't make anything. And he was like, okay, well, I am only getting 10% of what you make. So what's 10% of zero? And I was like, well, 10% of zero, I guess you would make nothing. He's like, so you're calling me to get me to work for you, come work for you for free, essentially. And this was, I think, one of the biggest eye-opening experiences for me that I happened to get early on. And it just really taught me the value of understanding what you bring to the table, because I was naive. Everybody thinks, pick me. But I really learned to show and kind of lead with what I can bring to the table.
I love the lesson that person shared with you, right?
Wow.
They didn't just say hell no and hang up. They gave you a life lesson there. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I've never forgotten it. I remember distinctly as if it was yesterday that I got a life lesson, and I'm so thankful for it.
Do you remember the person?
I don't remember the person. I wish I did, because if I did remember the person, I probably would thank them and want to have some sort of lunch or coffee with them. I literally just remember going through the agent book. You would pick up this agent book and you'd see like CAA and all of these big time agents. And I was just going down, calling people from there.
I was asking you about the name because I'm at the point in my career where I really want to highlight people that helped me get to where I am and thank them and personal phone calls. And we're also at the point of, or at least my career, that not all those people are around anymore. So even if I do remember the name, I call them and, or look in the obituary and there they are. So anyway.
This would be actually a very good point, but you just gave me something to do, because there are people who also taught me lessons in Hollywood that I absolutely remember their names. And I do think we don't reach out enough to tell people how they've helped us. So I think that would be really a game changer.
I'm going to highlight one or two on this show. They're going to be seen by tens, if not dozens of people.
I do. So there was one person, another side note, I went to an audition many, many years ago, and I spent so much time preparing for this audition, and I didn't get the part. And I was so disappointed because I knew I did such a great job. And I got an email from the director. His name is Luther, and the name of the project was called On the Low. And I remember getting an email from him where he said, "Thank you for your talent." He told me how talented I was, how great of a job that I did, but unfortunately they went in another direction. And that was so early on in my career where usually people just ghost you. You never hear from them. And so Luther, if you have a chance to see this, Luther, On the Low, I really appreciate that email that you sent me. I still have this email, by the way. I have never deleted that email because it's a reminder that you can be good, you can be great. It doesn't always mean that you get what you're intending to get at that moment.
Well, it's also a lesson to be gracious when you're turning somebody down, and don't just ghost them. Luther Angelo?
Yes. Luther.
What was the last name?
Luther. It was I think it was Mace, Mace.
All right, Luther Mace. There you go.
I'm really calling him out.
Let's go. Awesome. Hey, you rejected LaQuita. She's incredibly talented, but part of your her story is your rejection. So there you go.
Exactly.
How about any other stories? I know there's lots of stories of success. I mentioned 3 movies earlier. You were in a lot of commercials. But man, there had to be some trying times besides just starting out, like where you just rejected and fell on the street. Tell me a little bit. I know it's easier now when you're sitting here in your beautiful home behind you, but tell me what it was like in those days.
I think most of the stories in Hollywood are trying. I think that from the outside looking in, people see Hollywood as like, wow, people are famous, they're doing movies, but that's like a small percentage. So most of the time is me getting an audition, going to sit in a room filled with people, of course, pre-pandemic, where you're sitting there and all you're doing is sizing yourself up against everybody else. So imagine is if you are pitching someone constantly or trying to sell something and nobody ever buys from you. So out of every 100 auditions, you may get 0. So I remember even this is really laughable, but I remember a period of time where a friend and I would sit on the phone for hours trying to figure out what we could do to make it in Hollywood. And at some point, we had this bright idea that it was because of how our hair was. Something so simple, we thought, oh, well, our hair's curly. Maybe the hair should be straight. That's it. If our hair was straight, we would be making it big in Hollywood. So we would constantly change ourselves and try to figure out what we could do. And now that I think back on how much time I wasted, 3-4 hours we would spend, and then we would go on IMDb, which is the big site that you find everybody on, and we would just type people in and try to see like, well, what does she have that I don't have? What does this person have that I don't have? And I did this probably several times a week for many, many years in my career. So that's kind of a funny one. And then another one was, I remember I got a big audition in Robert De Niro. It was the Robert De Niro movie. And I don't get starstruck at all, except Robert De Niro. You folks know what I'm talking about. De Niro is De Niro. So I'm so excited. I'm ready to go in this audition. I go in the room and I just choked, just thinking of De Niro and like, oh, this is his movie. And I remember just being frozen, the feeling of doing all that preparation and standing there and not even being able to get the words out of my mouth. So that was another unfortunate miss because things may have gone differently had I got that De Niro movie.
Wow. LaQuita, thank you for sharing. There's three things I want to come back to from what you just said. Number one is comparing yourself to others and the trap that can become for actresses, for little boys and girls, for people across the globe. Everybody has some level of comparing themselves to others, and it's a death trap. Number two is I know that a lot of who you are today is based on and built on your authenticity. So the fact that you spent so much time trying to be someone you weren't is mind blowing. And I'm so glad that you are who you are now. And I'm sure that was part of your journey. And the third thing is around De Niro and locking up and talking about that and how defeating and deflating, I'm sure it was for you at the time, but now you're able to tell the story. And again, I'm sure you learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I think it's when I think back to the observations that you just said, the biggest one for me is this idea of comparison, because I think it's in every single part of society. There is no one exempt from it. I don't care how big you get. I don't care what industry you are in. And it's really dangerous. I mean, it's really the feeling that you have when you see other people on social media and you are wondering even why someone has more likes on a post than you have. And it was really a detrimental thing that I continued to do over and over. And when I stopped doing that, for me, that was a big turning point. It was like such a weight lifted off of my shoulder when I stopped comparing myself to other people.
LaQuita, thank you. I think you just inspired and empowered, or at least I hope you did, millions of people with what you just said, especially in today's day and age with comparison and social media. Thank you for that.
Thank you for sure. It's like, it's emotional. I even got emotional thinking about it. Oh my goodness. Flashbacks.
Let's go. Yeah. All right. So now you teach storytelling and helping people gain impact from their stories to, as I said earlier, entrepreneurs, Hollywood actors and actresses, and Fortune 500 execs. Tell me a little bit about how you are helping these business leaders tell their stories and how it impacts their business or their lives.
So really, we help people tell stories that I'm going to call it strategic storytelling or storytelling for engagement, because yes, people want to tell stories, but people are telling stories for a purpose. So usually business leaders are coming to us because they have a challenge. So maybe the sales team needs to increase their sales. So we help them tell stories maybe about the brand or value stories to try to connect with the customers more. Or sometimes we're telling stories because we are helping leaders understand how to tell their stories for thought leadership. So sometimes it's a personal brand story. So I would say the biggest ways that we usually work with people are you are telling stories because you're trying to motivate and inspire your team, or you're telling the stories because you are trying to increase sales, or maybe you are trying to get another round of investment and trying to figure that piece out, or it's centered more around thought leadership. There's a lot of people who want to do what I'm doing and speak. So a lot of people come to us and they're like, I want to be a speaker now, which is awesome. I think it's really great.
Well, I think it's Jerry Seinfeld that said the number one fear for people in the world is standing on stage. Number two is dying. So you're teaching people, helping people overcome their biggest fear.
Yeah, that's true. And I have another one. Whenever people are like, oh, I never have any problems speaking, I think I never get nervous. I have a quote for those people, and it is, there are only two speakers in the world, two types of speakers in the world, those who are nervous and those who are liars. So there's that one. Because everyone, even professionals, can get nervous, even just a little bit of nervousness before they stand up to speak before a big crowd.
Yeah, I like what you said earlier about storytelling and how it impacts your brand, speaking in front of your employees, in front of your customers. Everything we do, it feels like, relates to some type of story, how it's being received versus how we're telling it, right? So that's the beauty and the impact you're able to make, is have people receive your story in a positive way. Tell me a little bit about that. So less about how I am a public speaker and more about how I'm receiving your story.
Well, I think the interesting part about stories, it's kind of twofold. So one is that we know stories are remembered more than facts. So if we know that stories are remembered more than facts, it allows me as the listener, the audience, the employee, to remember more of what you are trying to tell me. So everybody who thinks employees are retaining everything from your hour-long meeting, I hate to tell you, they are not. So the stories help people to kind of retain that information. But the other big thing, the emotional connection behind stories. When I'm able to connect with you in an emotional way or relate to you because you are sharing a little bit of vulnerability or you are sharing a story, that I think is really big, especially if we think about how we make decisions, and the decisions that we make are based on emotion. We tend to think about this logically. We say, yeah, we make decisions based on emotion. Well, then why are most businesses talking to people only leading with logic? So if you think about this emotional pull, this is how you're also able to create a stronger bond so that you are not constantly playing that game of, oh, I'm trying to outprice my competitor. If you want to play that game and everybody's racing to the bottom to have the lowest prices, but if you want to really make sure that your audience connects with you on a deeper level, on a more emotional level, that is stories for sure.
Well, here's one of the things I just heard was the story that you shared about comparing yourself to others and being a young actress and aspiring actress and having rejection and comparison and what you've overcome. That's the story that I want to gravitate towards and buy from LaQuita Cleare. What I don't want is the fact that you are a pathological killer in a lot of your movies. That's I'm just joking. I don't know if you're a killer. I don't think you're. I made that part.
If you're just tuning in now, you'd be like, pathological. Like, what? What is she?
I don't know if you were the killer but
I was not. Actually, I wouldn't mind playing a killer, but have I played a killer?
Whoa. Let's go back to that. Say it again.
I wouldn't mind playing a killer in a movie because I always think those are the fun people. Like the people who think about the guy who played Jason or Freddy or something. That's kind of cool.
Hey, LaQuita, I've got to ask the question again. What are you hiding, LaQuita Cleare?
Come on, you would like, if you were playing someone in a movie, a character in a movie, who would you want to play? That's what I want to know.
I want to play the star quarterback that gets all the girls.
Okay, that's cool. I'll take it.
Boring. Okay. All right. So, hey, I want to ask you, as we talked about earlier, you know about my best-selling book, Who's Your Mike? A no bullshit guide to the people you'll meet on your entrepreneurial journey. In it, we have lots of different characters. Every chapter is a different archetype of a different kind of character you're going to meet. There's Mike, your accountant turned CFO that's in over his head. There's Bounce Around Betty, who goes from job to job because you're trying to find a home for her. There's Techno Tim, the bullshit artist who sells you on all of his technological skills, and he's really just full of crap. Help me. What was some of your favorite characters? What is your favorite character from the book? And let's riff about that person for a bit.
I would probably say the Bounce Around Betty is so familiar, not only to me, but to so many people. That person can also be very talented, but I do find that sometimes the people that I've had in the past that are kind of the Bounce Around Bettys, they're multi-talented, but they don't necessarily shine at one thing. So I think for me, the challenge has been letting that person bounce around or really trying to find a place for them where they can really own one or two or three things. Although I guess there's something to be said for people who can do a lot of things, but that one definitely resonates.
Yeah, definitely in the early days of being an entrepreneur, as you know, you've got to have people that can wear a lot of hats and do a lot of different things, including you. And then as you grow and scale is when you need to start getting those specialized skills and more professionalize your team. But you touched on a character that is really inherent in every entrepreneurial company. Really great character until he or she's not.
Well, I just laughed because after I said that, I'm like, wait a minute, aren't entrepreneurs bounce around Bettys? Like,
I know I am.
I'm calling out the Bounce Around Betty, and I'm like, wait a minute, am I a Bounce Around Betty too? Because we end up, especially early on, I did a lot more things early on than, of course, I do now. But yeah, early on, an entrepreneur is a Bounce Around Betty.
There you go. You got a bit of wisdom there from LaQuita Cleare. All right, so LaQuita, now we're at the point of the show where we want to talk about your unlocking move. And that is a key pivotal moment or decision point that really changed the trajectory of your career and unlocked your success. Would you like to riff a little bit about what that might be for you?
In addition to the earlier one about the comparison, I think the biggest one for me was really understanding the importance of not being afraid to bring who I am to different scenarios. Yes, we call that word authentic, but I have a bone to pick with authenticity as well. So that's for this conversation or another. But I think the idea is for me, when I learned that I could bring my fun, dynamic self to the business world, that unlocked my entire career. Because early on in my career, I was always working with corporates and businesses and large business leaders. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I have to be very serious, or maybe I should be this way. I need to fit inside the box that sometimes people put us in. And I distinctly remember I was on one job many years ago, and on one of the breaks, one of the students, I was teaching a workshop around public speaking. And during the break, one of the students came up to me and he said, oh my goodness, I Googled you and I saw you on IMDb. You've done movies and commercials. And I was like, shh, because I didn't want him to tell anybody, because I felt like I wasn't going to be taken seriously if people knew that I also had a Hollywood background and that I had done acting or producing. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. When I started embracing the fact that, yes, I'm dynamic, I'm fun, I'll tell stories. Like when I started embracing that, I think that's when things really took off for me. And actually, I think if it weren't for those qualities, I'm not sure I would be where I'm at today, because that's exactly what the business world needs. Hollywood has already figured out how to be dynamic, how to be engaging, how to get you to watch movies for 2 or 3 hours. Business people put me on a Zoom for 5 minutes with you and I'm looking on 5 other windows. So this is exactly who I am, is exactly where I need to be, what I need to be, and that's the best way to help people. But I often think that we show up in a way that we think we should show up. And we're afraid to show certain aspects of ourselves because of the situation that we're in or our job title.
And I can't tell you how much that resonates with me. And again, I hope you inspire others to be themselves, because you don't fit in a box. You don't have to be buttoned up or the corporate type. There's ways to be successful being yourself. I love what Zoom has done for us for that reason. If you recall early on in the pandemic, when I think it was the British guy had his, kid in the background and was walking around with a diaper or naked or whatever. And the mom was trying to, I think that's just keeping it real, human to human. And whatever we can do to be ourselves, it's going to make us more successful and make those around us more comfortable.
Correct. I think that's a good point. And then the other point that I would just make for people is that it's not always, sometimes there's an aspect of your personality that you wouldn't dare show people, but that's the one aspect people need. So a lot of leaders that I work with, they show very little vulnerability. And sometimes when they show that little bit of vulnerability, that is the moment that people feel connected to them. So that very thing that you may be trying to bury, the fact that you're an accountant, but you also masquerade as someone who plays guitar on the weekends, maybe that's kind of cool. Maybe that does not have to always stay hidden. So I think that for me has been a game changer and has really helped my career and my business.
Well, now we can add Stone Cold Killer Wannabe to the list of things that I'm
not claiming that one. That one I'm not claiming. I'm not claiming that yet. Nobody's hired me for that.
You're a great actress. That's all. Okay. So, hey, thanks for having fun with me on this, LaQuita. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
All right. So I consider myself the listener's advocate. If I've got LaQuita Cleare here, I can ask her anything I want. What would I want to ask? There's a lot of different directions I could go with this. I was going to ask you questions about some crazy jobs you had in Hollywood. I was going to ask you about maybe that transition, maybe some casting calls, whatever. But you gave me an idea early on when we were discussing earlier today about this concept of the casting couch. Is that real? Is that Hollywood? Tell me a little bit about that.
So it is definitely real. There are realities to that. And yeah, it is. I remember early on in my career, I remember getting this big audition for a film and going in to this audition and with the producer who was going to be doing this. And I remember going into the room, and at one point you bring the lines in. So we're reading the lines, and he started kind of ad-libbing these lines to see how far I would go, to see if I'd maybe come up to him, if I would seduce him. And I remember thinking, as he said, oh, can we do a little improv? And I thought, yeah, sure, we can do a little improv. And then as he turned this improv into something very, very strange, it was a scene where this particular character was like a call girl. And so he wanted to see how far I would go. So he was like, yeah, you come to my room the money's on the table. What are you going to do to me? What? Oh, well, you haven't done anything yet. And just constantly pushing more and more and more to see what I would do. Oh, come closer. And I remember being very young but understanding, thanks to my mother and my grandmother, I was sharp. So understanding exactly where he was going and kind of finding my way out of it. But I remember I left there feeling a few things. One is that I felt kind of disgusting, even though nothing had transpired, but I felt like, wow, I was so excited to go to this real audition, and that's all that this particular person wanted. And I was, of course, disappointed because I realized, well, I'm not getting that one since I didn't fall into that. But I think now that I think back on it, I didn't think so much at the time, but I realized how many people were not necessarily like me and did not maybe see it and fell into it, or maybe were feeling so desperate to have a job that they fell into it. So it really saddens me how many people do fall into these sort of casting couch tricks because of either they feel the necessity because they're desperate for a job, or they just don't really know any better at the time. And it really makes me sad. But on the bright side or the plus side of it is that I think things are changing because people are speaking out a lot more in Hollywood now. We see people dropping like flies. People are speaking out against producers, directors, actors. So this makes me happy.
More power to them. I really appreciate what you just said, and the light's being shown into the darkness on things like that. And the more we can raise awareness, the more we see those people get in trouble and not get away with it, I think the better it will be. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
It's another tough topic.
Yeah, it is. But I think what you said is true. I think if we share, it also shows us that it happens to more people than we think, and we have to just speak out against it. So yeah, I've had some interesting situations, but luckily I was able to see them and kind of overcome them.
I've got one last, I'll say trick question, not really a trick question for you. So here's the question. The question is, tell me one question that you're never asked, but you wish that you would be asked, or maybe you're secretly glad that they don't ask you.
I wish more people would ask me about how they can be more vulnerable when they tell stories. I wish more people would ask me that, because I work with mostly an exclusive business audience and public figures. I do wish people, especially those who don't feel comfortable sharing and being vulnerable, I wish more people would ask me, because then we could figure out more ways to get them to do that. I'm always pushing people to show just pieces of vulnerability where and when it makes sense. So that would be something that I think would show such a big growth, especially with leaders, that we don't think of leaders who show vulnerability as weaker. We think of leaders who show vulnerability as actually being stronger and being more human.
Yeah, I've found that people can connect with you more when you share some moments of vulnerability. It's I guess connectedness. It brings you closer,
yes.
And I do believe it makes you stronger because other people then want to begin sharing or are comfortable sharing with their own vulnerabilities, and so it can create such a deeper connection.
I think so too, and also it's just more interesting to hear the stories. Like I need to hear some stories that have some conflict in them. People, like, that's just more entertaining.
Well, when I join your podcast, I'll share all my stories of conflict and etc.
I would love to. Maybe that's a hint for me to maybe I can just do an episode, just have you on. I'll have the 1 episode podcast, and I'll have like a couple of my friends come on who I just want to hear stories from, and then invite them on.
I love it. That sounds like a beginning of a TV show, I'm sure.
Awesome.
So, LaQuita, where else can we learn more about you or the Cleare Communication Academy, or some of your other projects like Rock My Story?
CleareCommunicationAcademy.com. You can go to our website.
Is it Clear with an E?
I would love. It's Clear Community. No, it's the regular spelling of Clear, and not my name. So there's no E. Just okay. Cleare Communication Academy, not communication. Some people put an S on it. .com. But I would love for you to just connect with me on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. That way we can actually stay connected and have a dialogue and have conversations. And and interact with each other. I think that would be really important as well. And for the female listeners, we are doing a huge blowout storytelling event in Los Angeles, and it's called Rock My Story. So you can find out more about that too, rockmystory.com. But seriously, connect with me on LinkedIn. Friend me, we will stay connected. It's LaQuita Cleare. I don't think there are any other LaQuita Cleares, so you can't really be confused.
That part is clear.
Exactly. It's just me there when you type it in. So connect with me.
Love it. And on that note, we're going to wrap this puppy up. Please like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whatever. Please give us a 5-star review. That's what keeps us going. And I will say this, LaQuita Cleare, thank you so much for joining and being vulnerable and sharing your story with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
If you're an entrepreneur and you think you might have outgrown a member of your team, or maybe you've got a mic, as we talked about in Who's Your Mic, check out this quiz at who'syourmic.com/quiz. That's who'syourmic.com/quiz.